Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here in Beijing for this meeting. We hold this journal session at the conference each year, and it's a really great opportunity to meet lots of people and to tell you a little bit about the journal. So my name is Gregory Lim. I'm the chief editor of Nature Reviews Cardiology. And in my talk, I'm going to give a brief introduction to the journal, and then spend a bit of time talking about how to write a good review article. So Nature Reviews Cardiology is part of the Nature Research Group, a portfolio of high-quality journals. The flagship journal, Nature, was launched back in 1869, so it's just over 150 years old. And then that was followed by the launch of various Nature research journals and a portfolio of Nature Reviews journals, of which Nature Reviews Cardiology is one. And then that was followed by Nature Communications, which is a broad, multidisciplinary, open access, online-only journal, as well as the communications journals and scientific reports. I just want to point out that recently, about 3 years ago, we launched Nature Cardiovascular Research, which is kind of our sister publication, publishing predominantly original research articles. And there's also the Nature Partnership Journal, NPJ Cardiovascular Health, and the editor-in-chief of that journal is based here in China. So as I said, Nature Reviews Cardiology is one of a portfolio of now 26 different Nature Reviews journals covering the life sciences, physical sciences, clinical medicine, and the social sciences. And there's also Nature Reviews Disease Primers and Nature Reviews Methods Primers. We are a monthly journal. It was actually launched back in 2004, so the journal's just over 20 years old, under the title Nature Clinical Practice Cardiovascular Medicine, but we adopted the Nature Reviews branding in 2009, and that Nature Reviews branding had already existed on the Life Sciences Reviews journals. And our latest impact factor is 44.2, which places us at the top of the field of journals in cardiac and cardiovascular systems. And other journal metrics are available on our website. Unlike some of the other major cardiology journals, we have a team of full-time professional editors. I'm, the chief editor and based in London in the UK. My colleague Irene, who's here as well, is based in Madrid in Spain, and you'll hear from her next. And then the other team member is Karina, and she's based in Melbourne in Australia, so it's very much a global team. And we're also supported by an international advisory board of about 35 cardiologists and cardiovascular researchers. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our three our advisory board members based in China. They've been a great support over the years to the journal and seen it flourish. So thank you very much for your support and help over the years. As the name of the journal suggests, we predominantly publish review articles. We publish approximately 48 reviews per year. There are some other long article types that we publish. There are perspectives, which are slightly more opinionated articles, and we also publish evidence-based guidelines, consensus statements, expert recommendations, and roadmap articles. I'll say most of the articles that we publish are the reviews. And then we have several shorter article types. These are 2-page articles and include comments, clinical outlook, and news and views articles. And we publish approximately 24 to 36 of these per year. And then finally, we have some even shorter articles, 1-page articles, and these include research highlights that we as editors write. These are news articles picking up on important research or clinical trials that have been published in other journals, and we'll, as editors, write a news story about them. And then I'd just like to highlight two other new article types that we've launched in the past couple of years. And these are journal clubs and tools for the trade. Journal club articles pick up on an historic article that has been seminal in changing the field of cardiology or cardiovascular research, and puts that change into context and explains how it's advanced the field particularly. And then tools of the trade articles, as the name suggests, focus on a particular tool or technique, usually one that the author themselves has either adapted or invented to answer a particular research question, and describes how it's been applied in their research. So these two article types, we're particularly interested in having submissions from early career and mid-career researchers, and the link to submit proposals for these article types is on the screen, and I'll include it at the end of my talk as well. So in addition to these article types, there are some other ways that we're involving early career researchers in the journal, for example, in the peer review process. So when we invite referees to peer review an article, we ask all of them if they wish to co-review with an early career researcher. And if they indicate that they want to do this, then the early career researcher is provided with access to training materials, such as a free online course from the Nature Masterclass team. And this training specifically includes a module about peer reviewing a review article, which can be a different process from peer reviewing a research paper. And then after the report has been submitted, the peer reviewer can record that peer review activity via their ORCID account. They can download a certificate, and they can also be credited in the published article itself as part of our peer reviewer accreditation initiative. And on the screen is an example of a recent paper where there are actually 3 early career researchers who were involved in the peer review process. So now in the second part of the talk, I'd like to go on to say a bit about how to write a good review article. And the main principle that we're trying to achieve here, the goal of scientific writing, is to communicate empirical results and their implications clearly, accurately, and unambiguously to readers who often have limited time. So what makes a good review article? These are some of the principles that we're looking for when we assess proposals. We want the article to be timely. So often there's been a particular advance in the field, whether that's some new research or some new clinical trials, which means that the field has moved forward. So it's a good time to give an overview of the topic. We want the article to be novel and original. So we try to avoid overlap with recently published articles, whether that's in our journal or in other cardiology journals. We want the review to be authoritative. So some articles will just list results, but what we're particularly looking for is some critical analysis, and for the authors to give their expert insight into what the data that have been published actually mean and how the field is moving forward. We want the reviews to be accessible and of broad interest. So often the reasons that we don't go ahead with proposals is either they're too specialist and too focused on a very small topic, or perhaps they're too broad and are going to be too superficial. So it's important to pitch the scope of the review at the right level for a review that's going to be around 5,000 to 6,000 words long. We want the review to be objective and balanced and unbiased. So not too reliant on, for example, citations from the author themselves, but to give a fair overview of all the literature that's been published and is relevant to the topic. And finally, we want the review to be well-structured, logical, and concise. And this is actually somewhere that we as editors can give an input into the review during the editing process to make sure that it's accessible to the readers. And finally, we want the review to be forward-thinking and inspirational. So it should review the field as it stands at the moment, but also say how the field might move forward in the future and what further research needs to be done in order to achieve that. So I thought it might be useful just to run through an example of an abstract from a recent review that we published to do with heart failure and obesity, because it is quite a good example of how to structure the abstract. The first couple of sentences provide an introduction to the topic and explain why heart failure and obesity are important and the relationship between these two conditions. And then the authors say what the open problem in the field is, the fact that the relationship between these two conditions has been under-recognised, but the development of new weight loss drugs has brought this relationship to the fore. And then in the next couple of sentences, the authors state what the main objectives of the review are. So they're going to provide a summary of the effects of obesity on the development of heart failure and explore the epidemiology and the mechanisms that link the two conditions. And then finally, they say what is important about the review and the fact that it adds impetus to clinicians, especially specialists in heart failure, to become familiar with obesity management and the need to understand the interaction between these two conditions more. So if you want to submit a proposal to the journal, we ask, generally we prefer to receive a synopsis, an outline of the review, rather than the full manuscript. That means that if we want to tailor the scope at all or adjust the coverage, then it's easier to do that if the full manuscript hasn't already been written. And the outline should include the title, the proposed author list, a draft of the abstract, up to 200 words, and just the main section headings giving an outline of the scope of what's going to be covered in the review. And then a few of the key references that will be discussed. And they could be quite important for us to assess the timeliness of the topic. So if they're recent references, that gives us an impression of how timely the review will be. And then finally, some ideas for display items such as figures, tables and boxes. And these proposals should be submitted via our online manuscript submission system, which is linked to from our website. If we decide to commission a review and go ahead with it, after the manuscript has been through peer review, we as editors will do quite detailed developmental editing of the review. Often authors are quite surprised by the level of intervention that we make, but usually they agree that the article has been improved as a result of our interventions. And we're looking for various things during this process, including the structure and flow, the accuracy, the readability and accessibility, and to some extent also the language, grammar and journal style, although the articles will then go on to be copy edited later in the process. One of the things that the Nature Reviews journals are particularly well known for is the high quality artwork. We have a professional art editor who redraws all the figures to the Nature style. So the submitted versions can be quite rough, and that's absolutely fine, just sort of conveying the concept. And then our art editor will redraw it to something hopefully that's more visually appealing and easier to understand. So here's another example of quite a complex figure that was redrawn by our art editor to make it clearer. The lines are sort of straighter and there's use of color coding to make it easier to understand and, at a glance. And figures can be quite an important way of conveying quite a lot of complex information. So here's a figure from a recent review with a lot of complex pathways. It was to do with mechanoenergetic uncoupling in heart failure. So this is a useful way to summarise the information. Often these figures will get reused in conference presentations. So, as I say, the article will go on to be accepted and copy edited and typeset, and after proofing, the article will be published online ahead of print. And we do still have a print version of the journal, which comes out each month. So that's all I really wanted to say today. Thank you very much for listening. Some of our contact information is on the screen. Do subscribe to receive our monthly table of contents email. The link again is there for proposals for Journal Club and Tools of the Trade articles, as well as some of the information about our social media platforms. So thank you very much for listening.